Hey, you. Welcome back to Boundaries Unleashed, the podcast for recovering people pleasers, highly empathic women, and mystical self leaders who are just waking up to their power. Now, today's episode was supposed to be something completely different. In fact, I even busted out my emotional support wombat earrings today because I almost didn't want to press record, but I also am doing the work, so I'm showing up and being vulnerable with you today. So, like I said, today was supposed to be a completely different type of episode. I put out a call for your questions over the past few episodes after the past few weeks, and I really wanted to answer what was on your heart, what was coming up for you in terms of gaps in skill sets with coming to do with boundaries, the messy, the real life stuff. And no one submitted a question. Now, that was a first for me, but the truth is, no one submitted a question. And I'm not going to lie, my ego didn't like that. And if I'm honest, I felt a little embarrassed. I still feel a little embarrassed, ashamed even. And, it felt like nobody even cared. These are the stories I was telling myself, and that maybe the wisdom I have to offer doesn't matter. These are all the things that I was telling myself. And through the work, I know that that is just feelings and thoughts and stories I'm telling myself. But I'm here anyway. I'm here today. And I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to lie to you, because if I've learned anything on this path, on this healing path, is that the truth is so much more powerful than being polished or being perfect. And sometimes showing up when it's quiet is the most sacred work we can actually do. And so today, what we are going to talk about instead is what it feels like when the response is silence, why it feels especially vulnerable when you are the brand, aka me, I'm the brand of my own business, how to navigate shame when it creeps in, and three questions I would have asked myself when I was deep in my people pleasing era. Now, let's first start with when the response is silence, because obviously this is something that I experienced in the past few weeks with this episode, but I know it may be something that you've experienced yourself. I know it's something my clients tell me all the time. Is that I say something and no one responds, or I put something out and no one responds. So, what's uniquely painful about putting your heart out into the world and hearing nothing is the no replies, the no comments, the no raised hand. You're just getting silence, whether it be in person or digitally. It sucks. It feels hard. It feels hard to receive. And for recovering people pleasers like you and me, this silence feels like rejection. It feels like proof that we shouldn't have taken up space in the first place. But let's pause there, because, again, these are just thoughts, right? Thoughts do not mean facts. And to realize that silence doesn't mean you did it wrong. It just might mean that your people are still watching, that they're still integrating, they're still trying to find their voice, just like you were once. Okay. So maybe that is what the silence is actually indicating, not the rejection and all that. So, when your brand is built on your own story, your own voice, your own truth, it can feel like every piece of contact and content is a mini act of spiritual exposure. So, especially if you're in the online space like I am, or if you put yourself out there in a public podcast form like this is, or you show up on YouTube, it's very vulnerable to show up, right? And especially when you represent the brand, there's no product to hide behind. I am the product. We are the product. You are the product. Your lived experience, your insights, your energy, your wisdom to share. When no one responds, it doesn't feel like that post just flopped, or that episode just flopped. It feels like more. It feels like maybe I'm not enough. It has that I'm not enough ism to it, right? And that's why being a heart-led entrepreneur is both exhilarating and extremely terrifying, because what you're selling is permission, healing, hope. Things you can't just neatly box up and ship to somebody. And let me tell you that that's holy work when you're putting your heart out there. Just it is some of the hardest work you'll ever do. And it's also slow work. And sometimes it's quiet work. And sometimes we forget that. So it's always good to remember that it's holy, it's sometimes slow, and it's sometimes quiet. Now, with all that being said, what happens when shame creeps in? What do we do when the shame voice starts whispering, "See, no one cares. Why are you even doing this? You're embarrassing yourself. Just shut it all down, like close up shop." What happens when that shame voice starts happening? The key is not to fight it. The key is just to listen. Listen to it, but not believing it. And that's the tricky part, is to receive it without acknowledging it as truth. You listen so you can love that part of you that still is scared, because there's still going to be parts of you that are. That's why that shame is coming in, right? And so it's a radical act of self-love to listen and to accept that part of you that has that shame. Okay? We're not ignoring it or blocking it. We're accepting it and actually calling it in closer. And shame thrives in silence. So when we can bring it out loud, we can bring it and talk about it. When we make it more public, it loses its power, especially when you speak it out loud. It's no longer just you and the thoughts and the feelings. It's being shared and transmuted. So I'm naming it here today in front of you, being super vulnerable. I felt ashamed that no one submitted a question. I felt unimportant. I felt like maybe I should shrink again. Like I was like, this is it. I'm done. Blah, blah, blah. Big old emotional moment. But here's the thing. I don't shrink anymore. And you shouldn't either. When these moments happen, it is not permission to get smaller. It's permission to step even taller, stand taller, step into your power even more. Not for silence, not for shame. Don't be shrinking for that. Not even for a bruised ego. Yes, my ego is hella bruised. All right. But I'm still here. I'm showing up. I don't shrink anymore. And this is your permission to not shrink anymore either. Because when we show up with integrity, it's so much more important than showing up perfectly. And I know a lot of you can get behind that. So I decided that since no one submitted a question, I thought it would be a good opportunity to share what would I have asked myself as the coach I am today back when I was in my people-pleasing era. Because sometimes we just may be at that stage where it's on our heart, but we're not really ready to say it out loud yet. And maybe that's where you are, and that's okay. But let me just share what my version of self like that would have wanted to know. So here are 3 questions I know I would have had on my heart, but felt too tender to type into a submission box. Okay. And the first one is, how do I say no at work without looking like a flake or disappointing everyone? And this one was big. I haven't always worked for myself, but I have always worked, and I've worked for a long time in my life. And as a people pleaser, work is a place you spend a lot of time in, and I had a really hard time setting boundaries at work. So how do I say no at work without looking like a flake or disappointing everyone? And how I would answer that now to my previous version of myself is, when you say no, you honor your capacity. So it's not about apologizing for it, but it's about honoring your capacity and being a true leader in order to recognize what you can and cannot do. So boundaries at work aren't necessarily a defiance, even though it may feel that way or seem that way, but it's really about sustainability. It's being very smart about what you can and cannot do and what, is good or bad for the company. Okay. And you don't owe your coworkers or your boss or anybody at that business your exhaustion in order to prove your worth, right? Burnout culture is so done. We're so done with that. So I would say your no is honoring your capacity. So let's reframe that. You're not looking like a flake and you're not disappointing everybody. You're actually being very truthful and being supportive by honoring what your capabilities truly are. So that was the first question that I would have wanted to know. The second question I would have wanted to know is, why do I feel so damn guilty when I put myself first? even for something small. Now, this was huge. I mean, this is just about every moment growing up, every moment of my early adulthood. I felt guilty about putting myself first. I come from a decent sized family. We didn't have a whole lot growing up. And so resources were always scarce. So, in order to have more, like it felt guilty or even putting yourself first. It was always about the unit of the family or making sure everybody was brought up. So, even the smallest things I would feel guilty about. And so, how do I get around that? Right. And how I would answer myself now is guilt is our nervous system's way of warning us that this is unfamiliar. So when that feeling comes up, it's a, more of a warning system like this feels different. So it's not a bad thing to feel guilt. A lot of times people feel I feel bad, I feel so much guilt. Guilt is a warning system. It tells us, "Ooh, this is a new situation." And so just because it's new doesn't mean it's bad, okay? Guilt doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that it's different. And it'll pass. Guilt will come and it'll pass just like a wave. So it's not something that has to hang around or you have to attach yourself to it as identity. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I didn't realize in those early days of just always constantly feeling guilty. I felt guilt, felt guilt. And I thought it was something to trigger me to get smaller or retreat back. But really, it's just because my nervous system was like, ooh, this feels different to actually honor yourself, to actually speak up for yourself, to actually like put yourself first for once. So it's just a phase, right? Guilt emotion, it will come, it will go. It just means that things are different. And then lastly, what I would have wanted to ask myself is this question. What if I've gone too far? What if I'm not just setting boundaries? What if I'm building walls? Now, this is actually something that I definitely wanted to know because when I first started setting boundaries, I literally put up walls. It was like an armed fortress. It's like I went from one extreme of just saying yes to everything to the other extreme of just like "Choo, choo, 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 choo." There's walls everywhere. Like don't talk to me, don't come in. And it was really just a self-preservation mode. And I hear this a lot from my clients, so I know it's not unique to me. So how do you know you've gone too far? How do you know you're building a wall instead of building a boundary? And that question that it's even being asked, it's actually wisdom because you're already recognizing that there's a difference between the two. And the difference is boundaries are more of a bridge. They're a bridge of connection. They still let love in while preserving your peace. It's not one-sided. It's still fluid. It's more of a bridge. It's still letting love in. Where walls, something becomes a wall, it actually literally becomes bricked in, like there's no passage back and forth. It doesn't allow love to come in. And we tend to build these walls when we're afraid, when we really just need to shut down and you can't even accept love because it's like I have to turn it off. And so the wall goes up. And sometimes that has to happen. Sometimes it has to be a wall. Sometimes that is the first draft of our boundaries per se, right? Sometimes it has to start as a wall. But then as we figure out exactly what we need and we figure out exactly what's going to work best for us and us moving forward, then that wall become can start coming down and we can start using those stones to start building the bridge of deeper connection, more honest connection with others. So that's how you can kind of know. Are you still allowing love in or is love being blocked? Is everything being blocked off? When we block the pain, we also block the love. Now, I just want to say to my listeners, to my watchers on YouTube, if you've been quietly listening, if you're afraid to ask these questions, if you're unsure what you're going through matters, I just want you to know it really does. You matter. You matter. Your healing matters. It matters the most, right? This is all hands on deck now. Your voice matters. Even if it's still finding its way to the surface, even if that boundary is a whisper, even if just your truth is just wanting to come out, okay? Even if you ever felt like no one is listening to you, please, please remember sometimes the silence is sacred. Sometimes that silence is much needed space. Sometimes that silence is trust being built just under the surface. Okay. Now, I just want to just give you a big shout out and thank you for holding space for this conversation today. Thank you for letting me be real with you. Thank you for walking this path with me, even in the quiet, even if you're, just listening in and tuning in, listening to on your commute or, as you're doing your chores or whatever. I appreciate you listening, even if you are still quietly absorbing everything. Because we all have our paths, we all have our journeys, and I want to honor where you are in your path, and I'm still going to show up when I'm on my path too. Okay. I will say if this episode really resonated with you, if you can really relate to it, please share it with a friend who needs it because I know I'm not alone in these feelings. I know I've not been the only one who's ever been stood up, who's ever put their heart out there and made themselves vulnerable and like completely silenced in return and like birds chirping. So I get it. If you know someone who would benefit from listening, please send it to them. And if something stirred in your heart, if something really just like, oh my God, Vic, like, yeah, yeah, me too. DM me. Maybe you don't want to hit my contact form, but reach out to me. I don't have to tell anybody you submitted anything, but it's just nice to know that, if something truly resonated with you, like I want to hear it. And that just one step right there, you taking that step to reach out to me could be the beginning of your walls coming down and your bridge being built. So I invite you and give you permission to do that, especially if it's sitting on your heart and ready to be shared with the world. Even if that world starts with just me in my DM box, I want to listen. I want to hold space for you. Okay. Whew, y'all, we're building something real here. Okay. This ain't for the weak. Nothing's perfect. Not everyone is perfect. Nothing is perfect. We don't have to be performative. We can still just show up and be real and be raw and be honest with each other. I feel like that's where everything good in the world starts. So let's be real. Yeah. So I'll still see you next week. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. Those thoughts and those big feelings came. I sat with them but I'm still showing up. I'm still here. And I will still keep holding my truth. I'll still keep holding your truth with tenderness to become the boundaried women we are meant to be. And again, thank you for listening and holding space for me. And until next week, love yourself like you mean it.